The semi-final of the King of Aeon tournaments is going to take place on Roanoke Abyss. This is a hell of a map for a hover faction, and also for what is probably the most often missed destroyer shot in the entire game. The naval battles could potentially be hilarious over here. On the north side, we've got Thomas Hyatt. On the south, we have Massive, something that we're not expecting. Heaven got knocked out of the tournament, and I believe that Zlo is still in the losers bracket. So some of the people that I kind of expected to do the best in this tournament have either been knocked out completely or down a peg. So we've got a couple of new faces up here in the semi and final rounds. Let's take a look at these build orders. Ooh, that was a hitch and a half. I could count the dropped frames on that one. Wonder what that was all about. Massive is going first land, as is expected, and then a massive power grid is accompanying a second air factory. That is going to give him the ability to get transports out quickly and move them to all the different portions of the map. As we all know, Roanoke Abyss is not just a place for phantoms, it is also a place for ladder games, and when you don't have players in these extra slots, you got to get your transports out there to get those mass extractors, because there's a pretty substantial amount of reclaim on each island, in addition to the fact that there are 8 mass extractors. The outside mass extractors are the ones you want to upgrade last. They can all be accessed by frigates and killed. The inner mass extractors are what you're going to want to T2, but of course Navy is of critical importance because literally your entire island can be reached by T2 destroyers from Aeon and Cybran, and by battle cruisers, battleships, and cruisers in general from the other factions. So there is no safe place to hide on this map. Without Navy, it is an ever-escalating fight until one of the players meets their doom. On the north side, Thomas Hyatt is also going first land. Not quite as impressive of a T1 power grid, although he could have more queued after the land factory, going for a very respectable 9 power generators before the air factory, and then I'm sure that is going to roll directly into the transport. Typically, you only need like 7 power generators, maybe 8 if you're a little conservative, to go for an air factory, if Brink can even English. But if you're going for transport first, transports are exceptionally costly in power. So you're going to need 9 to 10 instead of 7 to 8. We can see the higher end here, Massive going for 10, and then dropping an air factory. One of the redeeming qualities of Roanoke is the fact that you do get access to a pretty good collection of tree clumps, so you can in fact rush a transport with only a handful of power generators if you're willing to sacrifice some of your early expansion by using your early engineers to reclaim tree clumps manually instead of going for the mass extractors and potentially walking to the nearby expansion islands. So it is all in how you want to play the game. Everything is a risk, as are most things in SupCom. But that is going to be a first transport build. Transport is already out from Thomas. He, of course, went for 1 less power generator and therefore was able to get his up sooner. However, he is probably struggling slightly more for power due to that fact. Then on the south side, we do have the transport out and loaded shortly to leave the island. There she blows. And Massive is finishing up an additional amount of T1 power generators. Of course, that is going to lead to more T1 air factories later on, because one of the only things on this map as critical as Navy is air. I know that that's true of just about every single game, but on this map in particular, there are all kinds of nasty airborne things that can head for you, such as transports carrying artillery and devastating your base, torpedo bombers that are eliminating your T2 subs and harassing your Aeon Navy that doesn't have any anti-air unless you build specifically shards or cruisers. And yeah, it's just not a good situation. So Massive is going to be dropping 2 engineers at the south side of the right expansion island. He's going to be heading up to the north and getting these done as quickly as possible, and it looks like he is trying for an aggressive drop on the far side for the enemy's island, but that is not going to work out well for him because his opponent was faster. He is carrying what looks like a T1 artillery, if I'm not totally mistaken, and he's dropping 3 engineers as opposed to the 2 that Massive dropped on his own island. Massive dunking those engineers into the water where they will build an anti-air turret. and then a T1 naval factory in order to have something useful happen out of that drop. And here we see, no, that was actually 4 engineers. If there had been an artillery, that would have been a good thing indeed. But we got a lab out that's going to be able to harass some of these engineers. Reclaim is going to clean up some of the others. The land factory may get dead, but it will not be a successful raid, and survived on 167 HP. There is a T1 bomber out that is going to be headed down towards this clump of engineers, but I think that Thomas is going to have to resign himself to failure, at least on that raid attempt. However, he did get his transport out alive and undamaged, so he'll be able to drop the other island just as easily, and he did get his own island without a contest. So he's going to be getting his second land factory up there, and building out his mass extractors, getting reclaim, and all kinds of other wonderful things that you do when you get control of a little bit more of the map. Alright, that is going to be a naval factory for Massive. He is getting into the water in 2 places at once as he continues the massive power generator string that is keeping him balanced on power, 500 power to his name, with a beautiful level of eco balance going on there. And Thomas is also doing quite exemplary, overflowing a little bit of power, but we can forgive him for that because as he dips down, he is going into the negative and reclaim is floating him. So I think that both of these players are giving us pretty good examples of how to scale your power versus your factories and keep everything in check. Thomas dropping 3 naval factories on the front. He does not have an advanced factory, but we can see a T1 air, land scout heading across to just kind of get a gander on the land and see what is going on to that edge. Then over on the left, we do have a transport headed out for the other expansion. Thomas much more conservatively dropping his own island and returning the transport instead of trying anything too terribly aggressive. But I will point out, there it is, that Massive has not made a jump for his island yet either, but he does have the transport now, will be loading it, and will be getting those mass extractors online. Aeon Navy versus Aeon Navy. If this isn't a crapshoot, I do not know what is. We've got Auroras heading across the water, which would be a very interesting thing to have happening and a highly effective tactic if it weren't for the fact that there is a frigate over there. And you will notice that the frigate killed 2 Auroras while taking approximately 40 damage. Yeah. Auroras do not have the vision radius, you gotta have the scouts with them, and they do not have the HP to go up against the frigates. It lands 1 bullet, the frigate kills it. Yeah, not a good showing. Massive dropping his island, but he is in fact going to be a little bit more aggressive than Thomas was, dropping 3 engineers on this island and then reserving another 2 to drop on the outside edges. Something that I do address occasionally because I get this question quite a lot. If you want to queue drops, you select the transport with the units inside, you click so a unit's highlighted, and then you will have a drop order, and you click to place that. Then shift queue the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and you can highlight more than 1 at a time. So in this case, you would have highlighted 3, drop order, highlight 1, drop order, and then a drop order to finish off the transport. If you just place a general drop order, it will leave whatever is left in the transport behind on your queue. So if you are wanting to get the most out of your transports without having to focus on microing them continuously, you are able to link all of your stuff together with the usual shift key. Very, very handy indeed. We do have a T2 air factory online. Thomas has stopped at about 500 power income in T1 P-Gens. Gone for the T2 factory is dropping a T2 power generator and is stalling a little bit for the trouble, but he is not stalling massively. Yuck, yuck. And he does have the APM to spare to go after this horrible move from Massive. There's the Grand acknowledging the fact that he basically just suicided all of his air. Why am I so skilled? Excellent air micro, good sir. Oh, crap. We all have those moments. Blast Shield had one earlier. I think it was Blast Shield that just literally walked his ACU into oncoming traffic and was summarily run down. But yeah, just bear in mind, even the 1800s have brain farts like that. Frigate versus frigate, 120 versus 550 HP. I think we all know who's going to win that. Ramming speed ahead. Only Subcom doesn't do ramming speed on naval units, sadly enough. Somebody needs to make a mod that adds this mechanic in, because that would be hilarity of the highest order. T1 transport dropping engineers on the outside edge. I do not know that it has been realized that there is an engineer there already. Massive, very quick on the uptake with that reclaim order, picking that engineer off and maintaining the mass extractor for himself. I love the T2 gunship that's coming out to this side, taking advantage of the air control that was won with such difficulty. That is going to start trying to pick off some of the naval units on this edge. Of course, even though you're not producing interceptors, you will to a certain degree maintain your ability to fight air, because the gunships will meet shield for your interceptors due to targeting priorities being what they are in an air engagement where you're clicking with move orders instead of with attack orders. But the longer you build gunships, the more likely it is that your opponent will outproduce you in air and be able to re-secure the victory, especially considering the fact that Massive has now gone for T2 Air, is building Swift Winds instead of interceptors, and is also spamming up more power and a second air factory. So Massive is definitely bent on regaining control of the air. T2 gunships raiding on land. There was a T1 anti-air built right there that is going to help out with some of these difficulties. And then Swiftwinds will be able to stockpile on this island. Swifties, of course, much quicker than interceptors responding to threats around the map. One of the great advantages that Aeon has at the early stage of the game. I do see a Shard out here. Shard is basically a floating T1 anti-air defense turret. Quite good on a mass-to-mass basis. I think a lot of people forget that they exist, and they are very speedy boats. They can run down T1 bombers nearly. I know they're not literally as fast, but they can stay in range for quite some time and easily get into range, more so than frigates. And if you spam these sons of guns up, you can actually overcome torp bombers if you spam enough of them. Obviously, you're not building frigates when you're spamming shards, so when your direct fire damage opponents come in, you're in for a bad time. But they are a useful unit that I don't think gets built nearly enough. Subs in the water for Thomas. That is going to cause a little bit of a difficulty for Massive, but I'm sure he'll have subs to respond shortly. Then you got to figure in that the Aeon frigates do have a small amount of torpedo defense, so they're not going to fare quite as badly versus subs as some of the other factions do. Massive in the water over there. Total of, let's see, 5, 7, 8 naval factories in the water, one of which is very heavily assisted indeed. And we do have a T2 torpedo bomber out now that Massive is relatively comfortable in the fact that he has enough swift winds to challenge air control. Over on the left, we've got a little bit of an issue with 3 gunships in the water. Aurora's on the way in. The ACU is exposed on this island. I see a lot of T2 mass extractors from Massive, although his income is not as high as Thomas's. We'll take a deeper look into that in just a minute. And I don't see T2 Navy anywhere on the books. So right now, I am going to scroll this screen in over here so we can kind of keep an eye on that edge. And then I'm going to move this over here where T1 subs are taking the win. There are 5 in the water. They are going up against these frigates, but then I see the torpedo bombers that are harassing them, killing 1 in a pass, because I think that the HP does not leave that survivable to a pass from a T1 bomber. But that is at least going to break off the naval engagement. A little bit further south, we have a couple of Auroras that are moving in on the island, but we do have T1 point defense going down all over the place. I love it! I love it! Look at this! Look at this! Somebody finally paid attention to terrain. They built the point defense on the side of the hill instead of behind the hill, and it will actually be able to shooty McBang Bang at passing Auroras if they were to come in range. So, hallelujah for not failing on terrain placement. I love it. If it was an accident, it was a happy one, and if not, then kudos for actually checking on something that a lot of people don't. Shard and frigates on the outside edge. That is going to be Thomas losing a little bit of ground, potentially a little bit of build power, depending on how this engagement goes. Although it does look like Massive is going to completely bypass the factories, perhaps assuming that there's more than one torpedo defense over that way. And he is going to move around the backside of the island, picking off mass extractors as he goes. And speaking of picking off mass extractors, these 4 Auroras are still happily alive, diving in behind enemy lines and killing off mass extractors hither and yon in the most aggravating manner possible. Might even pick off a couple more engineers. Yes, indeed they shall. And finally a frigate comes into range, knocking those sons of guns out. Alas, they were all vetted at least once. Some of them were racking up respectable HP counts, maybe even equivalent to other factions' unvetted tanks. But when you go out into the water against a frigate, Auroras are going to have a very, very bad time. While Brink is going mental about a correctly placed PD, an incorrectly placed PD is being built. And now Brink is sad. Dang it. Dang it. Massive, I had such high hopes for you. Why do you have to disappoint me so? I spy with my little eye a T2 Naval HQ that is building an Exodus class. You know what? I'm going to stop the limerick there, but I think you can see where the rhyme was going. We're going to take a look over at the left, where we're seeing a little small stockpile of frigates standing up against an Exodus class and a group of Auroras that are coming across. Think that the frigates will be able to hold up, at least for the time being. But yes, there's T2 Navy. We gotta get some Exoduses in the water in order to deny the T2 Naval push from Thomas. T2 upgrade is 88% on that ACU. Maybe just to get a little bit of HP, maybe to get a little bit of build power. Who really knows? Or it might even go T3 and go for a commander drop. That would be a fun time. Let's see a commander drop. Or not. Might not get that exciting. Swift winds are going to absolutely massacre the gray air, at least until they wander too close to the island that is inhabited by a vicious tribe of AA units, otherwise known as Thistles. I don't think I've actually ever looked at the name of the Aeon T1 Mobile Anti-Air. Thistles. That's actually kind of a cool name. Okay, so a roaming tribe of Thistles that is going to wreak a little bit of havoc on the torpedo bombers. Oh, holy hell. That is a lot of damage. That's not a little bit of damage. Look at this. Look at this. It's so strong. Why don't people use those more? Mountain tells me I'm the only high-rated player that mass stalls constantly. I'm minus 179 right now. Oh, good lord. Well, he's right, you know. But he does have the power income to match up with the reclaim ticker, so I would call that reasonably well balanced until, of course, you stall for 2,000 power because he went for a shield upgrade, and I don't know why. Although he may actually be going for the comm drop. That is looking more and more like a comm drop. 62 mass per tick, but of course that is not correct. He was close to 120. Massive at 92. We got 15,000 reclaim on Massive and 12,000 reclaim on Thomas. That puts them in the same ballpark economically. And I think that either one of these players still has a pretty dang good chance of winning this game. I'm really sincerely hoping that Thomas doesn't think he's losing and is going for a radical solution to a non-existent problem. But I am seeing a pretty significant air hold for Massive, so he may be in a small amount of trouble. Frigate invasion accompanied by an Exodus over on the left-hand side. There is a T2 naval support factory in the water over here that is now paused due to the fact that it is being ground fired. Probably better just to not build the unit, not waste the mass. And those frigates are going to pull back just a little bit. The Aeon T1AA name is cooler since Sarah T1AA is called La Isle. Oh, that's sad. That is sad. Okay. Thomas in the chat, the game must be over, saying that he was afraid of a comm drop. So he was getting commander upgrades to be safe from snipes. Okay, that's interesting. Alright, looking back over here, we have got a cruiser defending handily against T2 torpedo bombers. A lovely thing about the Aeon cruisers, they are the, well, maybe not the fastest. I can't say that for sure because the Seraphim might be a little bit faster, but they have a very high projectile speed, deal good damage, and they quickly retarget because they fire about once a second. So Aeon cruisers are the best single target removal AA in the game as far as Navy-based AA. So the UEF one is quite nice because you can stick it under bulwarks, but it wastes a lot of DPS. Cybern wastes the most DPS. However, it does have an astoundingly high damage output versus slow-moving targets. The problem is the projectile speed is so slow that sometimes it can't even kill T3 air scouts that are flying overhead because the scouts actually outrun the projectile long enough that the projectile times out, which is kind of ridiculous. And then the Seraphim is ridiculously strong AA for groups of units. So I would say as far as AA goes, my preferred is Aeon, then Seraphim, then UEF, then Cybern. But the Cybern one kind of fits into the faction philosophy of rush, rush, rush because it's the only one with a 100 damage deck gun that is actually useful in a Navy fight, plus the fact that it can toggle its anti-air off and use the nano darts to break shields and bases. Massive throwing out the G. What on earth? Okay, so Thomas takes the win on that. I know that he lost the right-hand side. Let's do a little bit of evaluation. I was running my mouth there at the end of it. We've got 2 destroyers and a destroyer there. Was that actually a snipe? No, that wasn't a snipe. Okay, so we've got 3 destroyers versus 3 destroyers and a cruiser with a couple of frigates, but there's still torpedo bombers in the air and frigates coming from the factory, along with another Exodus class. So this naval fight is not lost. He has Navy in hand on the other side. He's got another frigate coming in to rescue. There's only 2 destroyers in the water on this edge. He lost air, though. Wow. I mean, I know he was behind a little, but really? I kind of want to look at the score screen on that one. I think that was a little too early to throw in the towel. A little too early. I am disappointed, Massive. I am really disappointed in that one. But looking at it from what he would have been seeing on the map, it probably does look pretty dire, and large maps are hard to play. So if he knew it was lost and he just didn't want to waste any more brain power on it, I can almost understand Control Kang. Okay, so he's in the chat. He says, I knew T3 air was coming and I had no mass to do anything against it. So yeah, there is a halfway upgraded T3 air factory, and Massive was already behind about 35 mass per tick and was operating solely on T2 air with no potential to upgrade, and he had already lost air. Okay, okay. So maybe it was a little bit more dire than I thought it was. Oh, so that is going to leave Thomas in for the finals of the King of Aeon tournament. Well done, good sir. Well done. That was a solidly played game. Well executed through the whole thing. Slow and steady. She does win the race most of the time. Massive's going to drop down to the loser bracket. Does have another chance to come back. But we'll have to see how that goes. For now, we are going to move on to another game. That is going to wrap everything up for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, feel free to drop a like and share it with someone. If you want to support the channel, catch the streams, or join the Discord, check out the links in the description. Thank you all for being at least partially insane, and I will see you in the next one.